once they know this content, once they know what I'm talking about, what it's doing, how does it do it, I enter another level. To critically analyze. And I suppose if I've seen teachers teaching change, more often than not, it's usually right at this point. Critically analyze, I mean explain how, why, concerning the positives and or negatives. I want the kids now to have a little bit more of a personal view at this moment. Of course, I can tell them the positives and negatives, but I'm trying to get kids a little bit more now here to begin thinking for themselves. I'll come back to this very important thing because, again, I'm trying to teach skills. And when a kid can say, okay, there are 5 positives, 2 negatives, clearly they can now learn this skill of how to evaluate. Which means it's like a judgment on to what extent, to what extent. 10 positives, 5 negatives, to what extent? Is it perhaps successful? Effective. We all have, every subject has its own. Suitable. Useful, appropriate. You can make up your own words because we're trying to come to this element for this. Now evaluate at this level. There are different levels of evaluating. This level of evaluate, I mean each area or feature on its own. I'm just doing each one by its own merits on its own individually. To what extent is each one successful, effective, suitable, useful, and so forth. The next level is to be able to critically evaluate, which means to what extent overall. Here's what I mean by this. Let me just give some life situations. Again, lifelong learners, you're learning for life. Let's say you're going to get a review on your teaching program. This is what happened for me twice. The whole school went under review. I put my hand up, I volunteered to be reviewed. And I said, okay, in my program, I have 5 different areas I'm working on. So I look at each one, I name them. I have to describe the features, characteristics of each of the 5. I have to know what am I trying to achieve with each of the 5 parts of my program. And I'd better know how I'm going to achieve it. I mean, as a teacher, I'm always learning how to do that better all the time. How to achieve my goals better all the time. That's what I'm trying to do. But then I come down to the positives and negatives. What are the positives for each one on its own? I say, well, let's say those 3 worked quite well. But that 4th one, I hadn't quite finished before these big half-yearlies we had to do. So, bit of a negative. The next one is, by the time the trials come around, I hadn't quite finished the whole unit. So, of course, I have to adjust my questions for that. So I look at each one by its own merits, and I say, 3 out of 5. Now I can overall give you an idea about an evaluative level of my whole teaching program. I'll give you another for instance, just life. One day my microwave oven went pop, no longer working. So out we go to buy a microwave oven. I didn't know there were 3 types of microwave ovens they were selling. One's the inverter, one's the sensor, and one's the none of the above. And the salesman keeps giving me all the positives about the most expensive microwave oven, the inverter. I think it was $100, $120 more. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. Why is that $120 more? I want to be able to justify, according to the suitability of this microwave oven, I want to justify spending an extra $120. So I start going through it. Okay, what are the features, characteristics of each of the 3? What does each one try to achieve? You had to come shopping with me sometime. My wife loves it, actually. Maybe. But I try to ask all these questions. How does it work, the inverter? So it's an education. I'm learning about these 3. I do this for anything I buy, especially when a salesman is trying to give me all the positives to get me to spend a little bit more money than I really may have to. Okay, so I find out all the positives and negatives about each one. And I hear all the positives, for the inverter. It cooks more evenly, it keeps on going on, so it's more, you save money on the electricity. I'm going, yeah, I'm hearing all these positives, any negatives? And he says, don't worry about the negatives. I'm going, wait a minute. As soon as someone tells me don't worry, I begin to worry. What's the negative? Don't even have to consider. Yeah, I do have to consider that. What is the negative? And he just says, minor thing. Yeah. And he says, the minor thing is if you use the inverter oven, you have to wait 3 to 4 minutes for the microwave oven to cool down. I'm going, wait a minute. I have an immediate picture going, do I want to really sit around 3 or 4 minutes for that to cool down? I mean, in my family it's woo, 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 like this. Immediately, you just want to move it instantly. And I don't know if I want to sit around for 3 or 4 minutes waiting for it to cool down. So, that one negative outweighed all the positives and didn't justify it being suitable for my situation. Anything in life can be like that, where you have to weigh up the advantages over the disadvantages, over the benefits and the limitations. Last year, something happens where I decided to put my life on this. Last year in July, I found out that I had cancer, prostate cancer. Boy, your learning curve goes up then. So I put alarm sort of to the test in my life. I function this way anyway. This is just part of a natural process of my learning and making decisions. I found out that there were 7 ways to get rid of it, or attempt to get rid of it. And fortunately, at that stage, number 7 didn't really enter mind because the cancer hadn't metastasized yet. So number 7 wasn't necessary yet. So it broke down to two different areas of 3 each. And I'm right up here still. Yeah, there were actually 6 ways. 3 using radiation and 3 using surgery. I found out I really had to find out pretty soon what the features, characteristics of each one. What does each one attempt to achieve? I really want to know how was it going to do it. I've gone into a science class where they were studying a topic, something to do with, the topic name was something like less invasive medical treatments. Believe me, it's invasive. But this invasiveness, I wanted to find out what was least invasive, but also would be the most sufficient way of doing it, the efficient way of doing the job of what it was designed to do. And knowing how that works is quite important, but that's content. Below this line, I have to start thinking for myself. What are the positives and or negatives? I found out all the positives and negatives for them. And there was one negative that really changed my way of thinking. With the radiation, when the doctor said, okay, the negative is, if you use radiation, you cannot go back later and use surgery. And I heard that, and I thought about my family situation. I won't go into it. But I found out that one negative canceled out and outruled the positives. So I then started looking back over again at the 3 types of surgery. And he says, okay, the 3 types of surgery are, until I came to the robotic one. And he gave me the advantages and disadvantages, again, of all of them. But one of the advantages, in fact, he said about the positives about the robotic was that, guess what? If you do this, you can go back teaching in about 10 days. I went, oh, I guess that's a benefit. I can go straight back to work, straight after this. So you kind of weigh it up. I was saying, well, can we do it kind of after the holidays? No, we got to do something pretty soon. So I said, okay. So I chose the robotic. And I just chose it because that, to me, for my own decision-making process, became the most efficient way for doing what I was trying to achieve. You see what I'm saying? Lifelong learning, sometimes you may have to put your life in this. Yeah. I mean, we're wondering, you may have to do your teaching program, you may have to buy some product, you may have to decide on something medical. And I just used this process to be able to come to what extent overall was the best process or procedure. These are just learning for life. It's not different than what I have to do in life. And if I can follow the same process in my classroom, then I can help kids become this lifelong learner. Once I come to this moment and see I begin to see the whole big picture, I get them to try to conceptualize the topic, which basically means the big idea, which is good for auditory learners, or the big picture, which is good for the visual learners. The whole. Like I said, if I'm teaching a text, something to read, something to learn, I want the whole idea in one picture. What did you learn? And maybe 2, but I want it in a nutshell. I call it the coat hanger or a clothesline, because now I have everything to hang on. I have a coat hanger so I can hang things on it. If it's a clothesline, I know where to put the pegs, where they all fit together. So the concept, even though many subjects, the questions don't go to the concept level, if I can help kids arrive at this level, then maybe they'll be able to pick apart the pieces that are necessary to answer the question. Some subjects use concepts to understand concepts. And so if certain kids cannot recognize a concept or understand one, they won't know how to apply it, either in their subject or in life. The final skill, perhaps the hardest of all. I might go one even further than that. But the next skill level is how to appreciate their learning. By this, I want them to link their learning, whatever they learn, to life. I don't know about you, but sometimes, in fact, my first question I was ever asked as a student teacher, it was in the ghettos of San Diego, And the question was, why I gots to learn this? Do you ever get kids asking that in your classroom? Why are we doing this? What's it good for? Why am I supposed to learn this? It's usually the first thing they ask. And yet it's the last thing they come to. I may tell them at the beginning, this is a bit of a backward mapping, but I may tell them at the beginning, this is what our topic is about. This is why it's good for you to learn it. But they don't always get it. I have to go through this process for them to be able to link their learning to life. And I said, that's a very good question. Why learn? I'll leave that to you to think about for a bit. Why learn? That's the intrinsic value of learning. Yeah? Something maybe you can't measure. But appreciate is also this link to something else. Some wise guy is going to come along, and this is the extrinsic side of things, and you have to link your learning to a question. Link your learning to a question. That's extrinsic. Like I say, appreciate is a difficult skill. I mean, in life, does my wife truly appreciate me? Do I appreciate my wife? Do my kids appreciate what I try to do? Yeah? And it raises a smile because we wonder. It's not an easy skill. Perhaps we can only appreciate something when we've actually entered the position of another. Or I've been in the same situation. But once I've evaluated something, I'm trying to see the value of what I've learned. This linking to a question comes about this way. Because now I can score this. I can give marks for this. I've looked at every HSC question there is for every subject. Generally speaking, right across the board, and maybe except Maths, right across the board on the HSC, on our higher school certificate exams, that's usually worth 1 mark. Where they name and state and list and identify things. That's usually worth 1 mark. Roughly speaking, that's usually worth 1 to 2. 2 to 3. 3 to 5. We can double, triple, cut them in half on these marks. But you see how there's this overlapping, because each one is depending on the other to get along the way, to get further along the way, to progress. Below this line is roughly 5 to 8. Part of the reason, as was mentioned from my principal in his talk, when he gives his talk, is that so many times we get kids to that 89%, not to the 90. It's only 1 mark. But is it? And as my principal says, 89 to 90 is not just 1 mark. And I come in and say this amendment to that, I amend that by saying, no, it's not 1 mark. 89 to 90 is a whole skill set. There's something about that that just flicks them over. Here's where I put a +1 with maybe little stars, because they're actually seeing the whole picture and the relatedness and interrelatedness of all their content, and they're valuing it and linking it and answering the question. Like I say, so many times I think of this question and kids just write what they want to talk about. And plus they don't understand what the question is asking. That'll come later. I'll talk about the question later. Okay, I've come from top down. I put them from top down because although I may talk about those two at the beginning when I teach, they may not understand it till it's the last thing they learn in time. But if we can look at it this way, I have it top down for a reason, but if I flip it up, I now create a marking guideline. I can actually guide the kids in their learning. We speak about this assessment as learning, assessment for learning. We hear these phrases, but what does it mean? How do I do it? If I can put that up, I can actually grade the kids, help the kids progress in their learning to this higher order learning skill, higher order level of content, and actually help them along the way, assist them. If I've given this talk to some schools, I've heard criticism about that because they'll say, wait a minute, if you do that, you're actually giving away the answer. I go, no, I'm not giving an answer, I'm giving a structure. I'm giving up what I'll call, get another pen, what I'm creating is a pattern of learning. I'm just helping them learn how to learn to the highest level. And you can be very exact on why you're getting your marks, or in fact, why you're not getting your marks. I might add one more, which I haven't actually mentioned very much at my school. The final hope. The final skill, if you can call it a skill, is to love. To love learning. What does that mean? What does it look like? Really, if you find the value of learning when I apply it to life, life's question. When I can see I'm applying my learning to life and I see the value of that, then I begin to perhaps love learning. Call it a skill, I don't know. But it's definitely a quality. I may never achieve it with kids, I don't know. I know that if I'm teaching literature, I'm using literature as a means to help kids learn how to learn. Sure, they'll learn the content of the literature, they'll learn how to evaluate it, but I want them to be able to apply that learning to life, to love this.